What's happening? Good Thursday to all of you. Thanks for joining me as always. After a night of sleep and some thought this morning, I believe I know exactly what Elliott Wolf is up to. I'm going to get to that in just a few minutes. First, let's start at wide receiver. Yesterday was rough, right? Yesterday was a rough day. We all got through it. Calvin Ridley agrees to a deal with the Tennessee Titans. We had been waiting to hear from Ridley, and we got the news that we did not want. So Ridley is in Tennessee. Then we found out that Jonah Williams is going to Arizona. Tough day. Two of the top targets that were on the market for the Patriots gone, not coming to New England. But it's time to turn the page. We've talked about it. I talked about Ridley last night. You can check out the Breaking News podcast on the channel. I don't need to go in depth on that. Spent enough time on that man. So we're moving forward. We're turning the page. That's what we're doing today. And the question is, what do you do now at wide receiver? And Chad Graff wrote about this in The Athletic last night. Option one, obviously, is that you can sign an offensive tackle who's still on the market and use the 34th pick on a wide receiver. That is something you can do. Option two, you can take a look at calling teams and maybe trying to make some trades, right? Maybe pull a deal. Maybe do something with T. Higgins. Maybe do something with Brandon Ayuk. And Chad Graff mentions in the column last night that the Patriots called the Bengals. They called the Chargers. So obviously the Chargers, they had Keenan Allen. They had Mike Williams. Williams has been released. So they were calling the Chargers, and they called the Bengals. And as Graff points out, the fact that the Patriots called those two teams, it signals the Patriots are willing to go down that road. They're at least willing to entertain the idea to make a trade to bring a wide receiver in. Graff writes a trade package for Higgins would likely center around this year's number 34 pick, with the Patriots potentially adding a day 3 pick in 2025. Option number 3, accept no wide receiver 1. The other way to look at it, Graff writes, striking out on Ridley, is that it shouldn't change their plans too much. This is a rebuilding team. So maybe the move becomes just signing a lesser free agent wide receiver and accepting the won't be the type of game-changing receiver they initially set out to land. That would allow them to maintain the flexibility to try to add a number 1 receiver down the road. So here's my question for you, okay? Ridley's out. Ridley's gone. Here's my question. Which option would you rather see the Patriots take? Which option would you rather see the Patriots take looking at a wide receiver? Would you rather have them sign an offensive tackle and use the number 34 pick on a wide receiver? Would you rather trade for T. Higgins or Brandon Ayuk? Or would you rather sign a wide receiver and draft a tackle at 34? What path do you want the Patriots to take now? Ridley's out the door. He's not coming back. Which option do you think is the best option for the Patriots? What do you want them to do? Who do you want on this team? I'll tell you what I would do. My number 1 option is to sign Tyron Smith. And if Smith doesn't come, I'd look at DJ Humphries. I would look at one of those 2 tackles, and I would say to myself, let me get one of those deals done. Let me pay what I have to pay to bring one of those 2 guys in. Now, there's also another option here as far as tackle goes. You can trade for a tackle. Conklin in Cleveland, he might be available. Look around the league and see if there is a tackle out there that you think would be an upgrade and help your football team. But I would look at tackle first. I would look at the tackle first, and then I would look at drafting the wide receiver in the 2nd round. Or move into the 1st round and draft a wide receiver. Wherever that 2nd pick happens, whether it's at 34 or you move up and into the 1st round and you make that move, that's what I would do. I would look to acquire an offensive tackle via trade or free agency, and then I would use that 2nd pick on a wide receiver. That's my option number 1. And then I would take that veteran tackle that I acquired, and I would supplement that tackle with a younger guy in the draft. And that would be my 3rd round pick. I'd use the 3rd round pick on the young tackle. So now I have veteran left tackle, young left tackle underneath that guy who's my 3rd round pick. And if that third round pick really, really gets off to a great start in camp, I could always move him to the right side. I can move Owenu to right guard. I can move So to left guard if Cole Strange isn't ready. So I would draft an offensive tackle in the third round. I would acquire an offensive tackle via trade or free agency, and I would look at using that second pick at wide receiver. I want an experienced left tackle to at least start the season for my young quarterback. I want that experienced veteran guy who can protect my young quarterback. I would feel most comfortable with that. And I always look at the wide receiver class and say to myself, somebody could be a quality pick at 34 and end up being a wide receiver one. Or if you move into the late stages of the first round, you can nab a guy like that. So that's what I would do. That's my plan moving forward. That's how I pivot. Right now, I go out, I acquire a veteran offensive tackle. I look at that second pick in the draft late April, and I'm looking at a wide receiver with that pick, and that's how I'm moving forward. And then I draft a tackle in the third round. That's what I would do. What do you want to do? What do you want the Patriots to do now that Calvin Ridley is gone? What do you do now at wide receiver? Send a comment if you'd like. Of course, if you want to jump to the front of the line, you can do that by sending a super chat. It's easy. Just send the super chat, and you get right to the front, and we'll have those conversations that you want to have. Before I move forward and talk more about the wide receiver market and some of the veterans that you could possibly look at, because don't get it twisted. That's not the only thing I would do at wide receiver. That's not the only thing I would do. But if you're asking me how I would handle, first and foremost, both of those positions, tackle and receiver, I would be more apt to acquire that tackle and then look at that second pick for wide receiver. But I do have other ideas as far as how you can supplement the wide receiver room. But before I get to that, Nick Cattle Show is brought to you by First Class Glazing. If you need your bathroom renovated and or that bathtub glazed, check out First Class Glazing. Expert craftsmen dedicated to delivering top-tier results using premium materials and precise techniques. That bathroom space that you and the significant other has always wanted, you can have it. FirstClassGlazing.com, or give Jose a call at 617-849-0513. That's 617-849-0513. And if you mention this podcast, you will get a free estimate and 10% off. All right, let's jump to a couple of super chats, and I'll continue with my plan and how to pivot from Calvin Ridley. And I also believe, after a night of sleep and some thought this morning, I believe I know exactly what Elliott Wolf is up to. And I'm going to get to that in a couple of minutes. Dave Rooks jumps in. Good, Nick, you rock. Thank you, Dave. What would it take to trade for Sutton from Denver? Cortland Sutton's a name I brought up last night. And he is somebody that I would look to bring in. If you could get Cortland Sutton for a 4th-round pick, 5th-round pick, I would do that deal. I think Sutton has been impacted by the lack of quarterback play in Denver. He's been stuck with a very bad quarterback situation. He was stuck with a terrible head coach and offensive coordinator in Nathaniel Hackett in 2022. Russell Wilson was Chuck down Charlie. He's just checking everything down last year. So I think with better quarterback play, Cortland Sutton is a guy that plays on the outside. He can make contested catches. He can help you in the red zone. I would absolutely look at Cortland Sutton. And now that we saw Jerry Jeudy go for a 5th and a 6th, I think you could get Sutton for a 4th. Now, if you're asking me about the 3rd pick, I'm not necessarily willing to give up the 68th pick in the draft for Sutton, because I believe the guys that are in the draft might be as good, if not better than him at 68. You talk about top 75 pick. I'm not going to reach that kind of pick to give to Denver. But if it's a 4th-round pick or later, yes, absolutely a conversation, Dave. Another super chat. Justin TF Patriot. So far, no weapons or stud defender, still early. Yes, that'll be part of what I discuss in a couple of minutes. Obviously, people are using the word weaponize an awful lot, and they should, because that's what Elliott Wolf said. But there are different ways you can weaponize an offense, and I'll get to that in a couple of minutes. And I will tell you again what I believe Elliott Wolf is up to. And I'm going to try to have all of you sit back, relax, take a deep breath, and think about what Wolf is up to, and maybe it'll make you feel a little bit better, because I know a lot of people are screaming at the mountaintops and they want something done right now. I think Elliott Wolf is doing something that makes a lot of sense, big picture wise. I'll get to it in a little bit, but you're right. So far, no weapons. I mean, you got Hunter Henry, Austin Hooper, Antonio Gibson. Those are not the weapons that people were looking after. But let's not forget that this free agency class wasn't necessarily super sexy either. The stud defender thing, we'll see, still names out there. Josh Gemini jumps in and says, Joe Alt now in play at 3, if no tackle in free agency. I still think, Josh, that you have to draft a quarterback if you love the quarterback. I will stand by that. I'm going to stand by that take. If you love the quarterback at 3, you take the quarterback. You don't have many opportunities to land a franchise quarterback in the top 3 of a draft. When you have that opportunity, if you love the dude, you take the dude. But I've also said from the beginning, if you don't love the quarterback at 3, then my next best option is to move down a few slots, target tackle, pick up additional draft capital, and use that additional draft capital on the wide receiver position and other positions of need. If you can't trade that pick, which I find hard to believe, I do think the Patriots would be able to trade that pick. But if you can't trade that pick, then Joe Alt is part of the conversation. I appreciate you, Josh. I appreciate all of those who send the super chats to jump the line. Don't forget, like and subscribe. Every thumbs up means a lot. Every time you click that like button, more eyeballs gets to see the product. You know, YouTube will at least extend the reach out into the world for us, so this program can be watched by many other people. So don't forget to give us that thumbs up. If you're watching on Facebook, don't forget to give us that thumbs up. Twitter/X as well. Spotify, Apple Pods, you play a role too. I know you listen to this podcast on demand, but when you rate and review, that also expands the reach. So if you like what we do here, if you enjoy the community, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. And speaking of subscriptions, we're about 20 away from our goal. The goal was to hit 2,500 subscribers by April 1st. We're about 20 away. So if you haven't subscribed yet and you watch this podcast on the regular, make sure you subscribe as well. And we got the Patreon. Go to patreon.com/NickCattles, CATTLES, for all the details. Great first week launch at the Patreon page. More people signed up than I expected. I appreciate that. I appreciate everybody who wants more content and exclusive content. If you're one of those people that hasn't signed up and you would like to get more content and exclusive content, again, check out patreon.com/NickCattles, CATTLES. So, acquire a tackle, target a wide receiver with that second pick in the draft. But I ain't done. I'm not done weaponizing this offense if I'm Elliott Wolf. I would also sign a veteran. I would go out and sign one of these veterans. Mike Williams, Marquise Brown, Josh Reynolds. I know Mike Williams is hurt a lot. I know he's coming off of a torn ACL. But if I can get Mike Williams on a 1 or 2 year deal that is heavily incentivized, games played, all of that stuff, right? If I can get Mike Williams on that kind of a contract, short term, lower base salary, bunch of incentives, I would sign Mike Williams. Because Mike Williams, to me, at 75% is much better than Devontae Parker at 100%. So I would sign Mike Williams if I was able to get that kind of deal. That's what I would do. I would sign Mike Williams if he was open to the idea. I don't think Hollywood Brown is a terrible idea either. I'm not in love with Hollywood Brown, but again, he's better than anybody that you have on this team right now at that position. He brings the element of speed. He can play inside and outside. He threatens defenses down the field. So I would entertain Marquise Hollywood Brown. I would entertain Josh Reynolds. I know he had a terrible NFC Championship game, and that's what everybody remembers, but he was a steady force in Detroit. He's somebody who can also move around a little bit. So I would look at another vet receiver. So in totality, so far, acquire an offensive tackle via free agency or trade, Target a wide receiver with that second pick in the draft that you have, whether it's at 34 or you move into the first round and draft somebody. Sign a veteran wide receiver on a short-term deal, like no risk, high reward type deal. And I'm still not done. I would draft another wide receiver. I wholeheartedly, from day one, have said this team should double dip in the draft at wide receiver. It doesn't mean you have to draft a wide receiver in the second round and third round, but I think you should absolutely double dip at that position. That's what I would do. So when you look at it from 30,000 feet, I'm acquiring a tackle, free agency or trade. I'm drafting 2 wide receivers in this draft. And one of those wide receivers, the first one that I'm picking, is either at 34 or I'm moving up into the first round to draft that guy. I'm signing a veteran wide receiver, and that's what I'm doing with that room. And that's what I'm doing with this offense. Remember my slogan. If you haven't heard it yet, or you don't remember it, my slogan for this season, right, for the Patriots, this offseason, Patriots, just get better. That's the point. It's not about contending. It's not about looking at Super Bowls. It's not about any of that. It is about getting better. Just get better. And let me ask you this. Is Mike Williams, the 34th pick in the draft, Pop Douglas, Kendrick Bourne, another drafted wide receiver, and if you hold on to Juju because of his contract, if Juju's like your 5th or 6th guy, is Mike Williams, the 34th pick, Pop Douglas, Kendrick Bourne, another drafted wide receiver, and Juju Smith-Schuster, is that better than Devontae Parker, Juju Smith-Schuster, Pop, Bourne, Juju, and Tyquan Thornton? Is that better? Yes, it's better. Your wide receiver room is better. You have a mix of young and old. That's what you would do. You got rid of Parker. He gone. If you can't get rid of Juju, stash him at the back of the line. Maybe, just maybe, he's healthier and he can actually contribute. But if you've got Hollywood Brown, 2 young receivers from the draft, Pop Douglas and Kendrick Bourne, your pass catchers are much better than they were a year ago. You have Hunter Henry coming back. You signed Austin Hooper, who I think is an upgrade over Pharaoh Brown. So it's not the big splash. I wanted Calvin Ridley, not at the money that he got. It's not the big splash. But unequivocally, that wide receiver room is much better this year than it was last year. And that's the point. If you can have a Tyron Smith at left tackle, Cole Strange at left guard, David Andrews at center, Sidney So at right guard, and Mike Owenu at right tackle, that offensive line is also better. Just get better. That's the point. That offensive line would be better than the question mark you had at right tackle to start the season. So when I look at it, that team I just put together is better than what you had in 2023. The quarterback position is obviously going to get better. Jacoby Brissett, if you utilize that 3rd pick on a quarterback, even if you utilize 34 for a quarterback, your quarterback room is going to be better. So it's not going to be this huge jump, and you're not going to go from 4-win team to contender immediately, but you are upgrading almost at every single solitary position that you need to upgrade at. And I think that would be a win. All right, let me get into Elliott Wolf. I had this epiphany this morning, and I hope you enjoy this. I hope you pick up what I'm putting down. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, rate, and review. Aside from Calvin Ridley, what we have seen is a ton of 1-year and 2-year deals from Elliott Wolf. And I think I know exactly what Elliott Wolf is up to. Now, I saw my friend Greg Bedard on Felger and Maz yesterday. It's the only 2 hours of that show I've watched in the last few weeks. Trust me when I tell you. And I watched it because I knew that Greg was going to fight back. He was going to push back on Felger. And man, was that entertaining. And they were having this beef about, old school Green Bay Packers and all that stuff. We don't have to focus on the 90s Packers. You know who we need to focus on? Do you know what Elliott Wolf is doing, in my estimation? What team we should be paying attention to? It's a team that's run by an old friend, the Houston Texans. That's the team we should be looking at. When we talk about what Elliott Wolf is doing, when we talk about how to build this football team, you look at the Houston Texans. The Texans, let me tell you what they did last offseason, because I'm sure there's not a lot of people out there that know, like the back of their hand, what the Houston Texans did in the offseason in 2023. Last year, the Texans had the fourth most cap space in the NFL. So Houston walked into the offseason last year with a boatload of money, okay? The fourth most in the league. Do you know what they did? They hired a first-time head coach, defensive guy, in D'Amico Ryans. Sound familiar? And they used all of that cap space not to make a splash. Houston went out and they signed Dalton Schultz to a one-year deal. Dalton Schultz is your Hunter Henry. Houston went out and they signed Devin Singletary to a one-year deal. Antonio Gibson is your Devin Singletary. Houston went out and signed one-year deals with linebackers Denzel Perryman and Corey Littleton. Josh Uche and Sion Takitaki are your Perryman and Littleton. The Texans went out and signed Sheldon Rankins, defensive tackle, to a one-year deal. Do you sense a trend? Sheldon Rankins is your Watts, who we'll talk about a little bit later. Houston went out and signed Robert Woods to a two-year deal. Robert Woods would be your Mike Williams or your Hollywood Brown. They also signed Noah Brown, wide receiver, to a one-year deal. I would say maybe that's your Jalen Reagor. And at quarterback, the Houston Texans signed Case Keenum to a two-year deal. Case Keenum is your Jacoby Brissett. When you think about how Elliott Wolf is building this team, forget all the noise that's happening out there. And I know it's difficult. Last night, I was disappointed. But when you're rebuilding, you've got to look at this from 30,000 feet. You've got to look at this with reason. And I was sitting there this morning, and I realized Elliott Wolf is pulling a page out of the book of Nick Caserio last offseason. That's what he's doing. He's signing a bunch of veterans to 1 or 2 year deals. That's what he's doing. He's got a defensive head coach, first time on the job, very similar to Gerard Mayo. Played the same position, a lot of the same kind of personality traits. That's what they're doing. The Texans are the example, folks. And think about what happened from 2022 to 2023 with Houston. Now, they made a leap. I'm not sure Caserio was expecting that kind of leap. But when you look at philosophy and approach, what's going on right now seems to be very, very similar here in New England to what they did in Houston last year. And here's the biggest part of that plan. Houston hit on the draft. They were aggressive, and they hit on the draft. You got to hit on the draft. You've got to be aggressive within the draft. That's the biggest key to all of this. Whether you signed Ridley or not, whether it's Ridley or Mike Williams or Hollywood Brown, you're signing veterans. All the other guys that you are signing are pretty much 1 or 2 year deals. Michael Wenhu's going to get the bag. Good for him, right? But everybody else that you're seeing, all of these different deals that are done are 1 or 2 years. That's what they're doing. And if you want to get to a really freaky level, do you want to know how close this is to what Houston did? Who did Houston extend last year? Who did they give big money to in September? Do you know who they gave big money to? Their offensive lineman. Nick Caserio gave the bag to Laramie Tunsil. You want to get even more freaky with this? Laramie Tunsil represented himself. Who represents himself? Mike Owenu. When you look at the Texans, they are the Patriots right now a year ago. They signed a bunch of veterans to 1 or 2 year deals. I just went down the list with you. They ended up giving the bag and extending their best offensive lineman, who represented himself in Laramie Tunsil. And it all began by hiring a young, personable, charismatic, former top linebacker in the NFL in DeMeco Ryans. You've got Gerard Mayo. It's a copycat league. If you're looking at Houston a year ago and you're looking at New England right now, they're looking at each other. It's the Spider-Man meme. It's the Spider-Man gif. It's bananas. So what did Houston do? How did they make that leap? Again, they nailed the draft. They picked C.J. Stroud, franchise changer, franchise quarterback. They then moved up. They were uber aggressive, right, to draft Anderson. Huge move. They hit on the wide receiver pick in the later rounds with Tank Dell. That's what Elliott Wolf has to do. If you want to rebuild this thing, if you are following in the footsteps of the Houston Texans, which I don't think is a bad idea, if you are going to do that, and remember, the first person they wanted to hire at offensive coordinator was Zach Robinson, reportedly. Then it was Nick Caley. Some say it was Nick Caley and not Zach Robinson, but very similar to Bobby Slowick. I mean, that's the plan, folks. That's the blueprint. But to follow through on that blueprint and to be as successful as Houston was, you've got to nail the draft. If it's Drake May, you don't need Drake May to be C.J. Stroud in 2024, but you need Drake May to be a franchise quarterback by 2025. If it's Jaden Daniels, same thing. You have to hit on the quarterback pick like Nick Caserio did. That's the most important thing of all. Ran down the free agents, gave you all the similarities, but the biggest thing about this is nailing that quarterback pick. If you nail that quarterback pick and it's the right guy, then that quarterback is going to have the ability to lift others, and now you're on your way. I'll give you an example. Let's say the Patriots draft May or Daniels, one of those guys, right? Whoever falls to them at 3. The Patriots hit on that pick. You've got your future franchise quarterback like the Texans have C.J. Stroud. Let's say the Patriots, following the Houston plan, what if the Patriots got super aggressive and moved up from 34 to jump into the first round to draft their receiver? What if they draft Brian Thomas? What if they draft A.D. Mitchell? There's your young receiver. And then you draft an offensive tackle in the 3rd round. And then what do? What can we learn from Houston? We know what they did in 2023. What did they do this offseason? They spent money. They went out, they signed a Neil Hunter. They went out, they signed a Nico Autry. They kept Dalton Schultz. So what Houston did was they spent money on short-term deals, gave the money up front, got aggressive in the draft, nailed the draft. The Patriots are giving a lot of short-term deals, money up front, aside from the offensive lineman, just like Houston, Tunsil versus Owenu. And then what they did was they nailed the draft. They built that team throughout the year. They have the foundation, and then they went into this offseason and started to spend money on some big-ticket items like the Neil Hunter. Do you know how much cap space the Patriots have right now for next offseason? They have like $200+ million in cap space. They have a buttload of cap space for next year. So what I think is going to happen, I think what Wolf wants to do is he wants to continue to target good players and even top-tier players that are still left on the market, but he wants to keep these guys to 1 or 2 year deals. So I anticipate Elliott Wolf targeting 1 to 2 year deals to fill the needs on this team that are left. He's going to continue to do this. Now, my hope is you get some bigger names. But I'm thinking that Elliott Wolf is looking at Tyron Smith and saying, we'll give him a 1 or 2 year deal with a bunch of money up front because we're not going to give him this long-term deal, which will just cripple us. Justin Simmons is another name, right? Maybe you give Justin Simmons a bunch of money on a 1 or 2 year deal and he solves your free safety problem for a year or two. One of those receivers we talked about earlier. Grab one of those guys on a 1 or 2 year deal. But the draft and the success in that draft is critical to the operation. But that's what I think Elliott Wolf is doing. I believe Elliott Wolf is taking a page out of the book of the Houston Texans. And he's not going to overextend himself on a bunch of guys. He's just not going to do it. All right, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We're about 20 people away from hitting our subscription goal of 2,500 subscriptions by April 1st. We're well ahead of that. So let's continue to pound away. Let's continue to build the momentum. If you're listening on Spotify and Apple Pods, also don't forget to rate and review. Patreon, great first week. Great first week at Patreon. Very successful launch. I appreciate every single one of you. If you're looking for more content from yours truly, exclusive content outside of this podcast, you can check out the Patreon page. $5 a month, $1.25 a week. We have a mailbag for you that will be dropping tomorrow, a Q&A hangout kind of session twice a month. And I also drop at least one podcast every week, ad-free, on demand for those Patreon members. So it's patreon.com/Nick Cattles, Cattles. All right, let me run through some of these chats quickly. Ryan Shaw jumps in and says, am I the only one who was glad we didn't sign Ridley? I don't think you're the only one. I was actually pretty shocked last night. I was going through some of the comments. And by the way, a couple days ago, there must have been a problem with YouTube. I usually get a lot of comments like emailed to me, and I'm able to jump in and kind of respond. But like 2 or 3 episodes ago, that wasn't the case. So I apologize if I didn't get back to your comment or whatever, but I think it was a YouTube issue. But last night it was back to normal, and I was looking at some of the comments. I was actually pleasantly surprised that a lot of people that reacted to the episode last night that we did on Calvin Ridley, I was pleasantly surprised by how many people were okay with the Patriots stepping away, with the Patriots not spending the 24, 25, 26 million that it would have cost to bring Ridley in. I wanted Ridley. I'm higher on Ridley than other people are, but I have no problem with the Patriots stepping away. I said on this podcast multiple times, several times, my ceiling for Ridley was about 20 million. I said, if you got to go to 20 million, go to 20 million. Dude got 23 million. And we went over that yesterday. I don't want to put too much into it, but I thought it was too much money for Calvin Ridley, especially with the situation that you're in right now. Rob D jumps in. My guy Rob says, no thank you on Sutton. Keep all of your draft picks, please. It's a reasonable take. I understand that. Look, you could argue that you'll get somebody who's as good as Cortland Sutton with a draft pick. I get that. I just like the flexibility and the options. Like if you trade for Cortland Sutton, you get to the 3rd or 4th round, you might not be in love with one of those receivers on the board, but at least you got Cortland Sutton in your pocket. Right? Matthew Murphy. The reality is it doesn't seem the team is inclined to spend this year. They're going to be forced to take a quarterback, left tackle, wide receiver, hope the kids can play. Offense looking just as poor as last year. I disagree, Matthew. Again, we've got to wait. First and foremost, we've got to wait for the full picture. But what we can't underestimate is how terrible the offense was a year ago. Like I keep hearing people say, oh, they're bringing everybody back. They're not going to bring everybody back offensively. They added Antonio Gibson. I think he's a very good 3rd down back as long as he doesn't fumble the football. They brought back Hunter Henry. I'm good with that. I believe Austin Hooper is an upgrade over Pharaoh Brown. Not by much, but I think he's an upgrade. I don't think they're going to go the rest of this offseason and not add multiple receivers. I think, honestly, why people are concerned about the draft idea is because they're just shook from the past, and we can't be shook from the past. It's the same thing I talk about when we discuss the quarterback. You can't be shook because in prior drafts, the third quarterback taken didn't work, because there are drafts that the third quarterback that was taken was the best quarterback in that draft. And there are drafts recently, we went through this in an episode a few weeks ago. There are recent examples of a draft that gave you three or four quarterbacks that end up being really good franchise quarterbacks for those teams. You can't be shook by the past. Every draft is different. And Alonzo Highsmith and Elliott Wolf are running this draft, not Bill Belichick. And this draft is ridiculously deep at wide receiver. If you get A.D. Mitchell, for example, I think A.D. Mitchell is at least a wide receiver 2 in his rookie season. At least. You could argue if he pops and hits his potential right away, he could be a number 1 guy. Think about Houston, the example I've been using. They didn't have some stud crazy wide receiver. They drafted Tank Dell, worked out. Nico Collins has been in the league for a few years. He worked out. They developed him. They went out and signed Noah Brown. Who was dying for Noah Brown? But they hit it right on the quarterback. So if you draft a couple of guys, whether it's, Leggett, or it's A.D. Mitchell, or it's McConkey, whatever name you want to throw out there, if you hit on that pick, then you got a wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2. So I just think a lot of people are worried because of the N'Keal Harry syndrome. We've got to get over that. We have to get over that. Teams swing and miss on picks all the time. They don't react by not swinging again. Makes no sense. The 49ers took a huge swing on Trey Lance. They kept swinging at the quarterback position. They somehow landed on Brock Purdy. Now, I'm not telling you that Brock Purdy is great. I don't think he's great. But you get the point. The Eagles kept swinging at wide receiver until they got it right. That's what you've got to do. The draft is an inexact science. You've got to trust your evaluation. You've got to trust your eyes and trust the tape. And if you draft correctly, like Houston did, that's how things turn around quickly. So I wouldn't be shook about, oh, this guy got drafted and he didn't work out. That guy got drafted and he didn't work out. Stanley jumps in and says, Tennessee overpaid because of the A.J. Brown trade. Another example, right? Another example. Tennessee swung, they hit on A.J. Brown. John Robinson traded A.J. Brown, which reportedly Mike Vrabel wasn't happy with. But did Tennessee stop there? No, they traded A.J. Brown. They drafted Burks. Burks didn't work out. Did they stop there? No, they went out and they signed DeAndre Hopkins like the Patriots should have done last offseason. But they went out and they got DeAndre Hopkins. Did they stop there? No, they went out just yesterday and got Calvin Ridley. You got to keep swinging. That's the point. You got to keep swinging. You can't be scared. Scared money don't make money. So when you just got to hit. You just have to hit in the draft. That makes all the difference in the world. Amstel 54 says, Nick for GM 2024. That ship has sailed. I am open to ideas for 2025, however. If Robert or Jonathan are watching, I'm available. Patriots Loco. Mike Williams has paper knees. He's basically Juju. I think Mike Williams at 70% is better than Devontae Parker. Again, let's keep it in context, folks. Does it really hurt you if you sign Mike Williams to a 1-year deal with a bunch of money that is incentive based on games played? Does that really hurt you? No, it doesn't hurt you. So I would take a flyer. I'm not going crazy about Mike Williams. I'm not telling you that Mike Williams is the guy that I'm willing to die on the hill for. I'm just looking at him and saying, big-bodied receiver, gets down the field, can make contested catches. I think he's much better than Devontae Parker. And as long as you don't have to, go crazy with the contract and risk something on a guy that does have shaky knees, then I would be for it. I would also be looking at Hollywood Brown. Look, you need to just improve the wide receiver room. That's the point. Just improve. Just get better. That's the slogan for this offseason. Just get better. You don't have to get astronomically better. Just get better. And then you look at the draft, and you've got to hit in the draft. All right, we've got a super chat here. Cool, Genuine Phil. Draft 2 receivers in the draft. A.D. Mitchell in 3rd round. I'd love it. Look, I got a big crush on A.D. Mitchell. I loved A.D. Mitchell before the combine. Then the combine happened, and I was doing cartwheels. Mitchell is a freaking stud. And that's why I used him as the example. I think he's going in the 1st round. And if you use Houston, if you use what Houston did, they got crazy aggressive and moved up to draft Will Anderson, right? They drafted Stroud, and then they jumped up to 3 to draft Anderson. I don't think you have to go that wild. You don't have to go buck wild. But if you can move into the 1st round, if you can get to 20 to 25, and you draft A.D. Mitchell, if they think A.D. Mitchell can be a bona fide number 1 guy, then be aggressive and go get your young bona fide guy. And then that young bona fide guy develops along with your young quarterback. There's a lot of different ways we can skin the cat. But I have stayed consistent on this. I would be double dipping in the draft at wide receiver. Even if you got Calvin Ridley, I was double dipping. My off-season offensive plan was to sign Ridley and double dip in the draft. And that hasn't changed, aside from Ridley, because he gone. But I'm still double dipping. That's what I would do. All right, 2 signings yesterday. Let's go over them. As you guys continue to like, subscribe, and comment to the podcast. Got to get to 25 subscriptions by April 1st, and we're getting closer. We're about 20 away from that 2,500. Don't forget to subscribe. Click those notifications as well. And rate and review. Spotify, Apple Pods. Patreon page, exclusive content. Appreciate everybody that signed up. Did a podcast last night at what was it, 9:30? Because Calvin really decided to agree to terms with Tennessee at what, 5:30? I was like, you got to be kidding me. So yesterday was a 3-podcast day, but I love doing it. And I love all you guys that hang out with us. And I apologize to Maryland. I will not say N'Keal Harry again, other than right there. I don't mean to trigger you. All right, a couple of signings yesterday that we didn't get to. Armon Watts from Pittsburgh, 1-year deal. This dude's big, 6'5", 307 pounds. He is your Lawrence Guy replacement in a way, right? That's why you sign him. You bring him in to be that, big defensive tackle. Now, before I continue on that, there's one piece I did forget I want to go back to about Houston. Remember I talked about Houston, bunch of 1-2-year deals, veterans, right? And then they nailed the draft. And then they went into this offseason with cap space, and they ended up spending some money on some bigger names. I just want you to think about this before I go back to Watts signing yesterday. The draft, not the draft class, the free agency class next year. The 2025 wide receiver free agency class. You ready for this? Keenan Allen. Now, of course, not all of these guys are going to be free agents by next year. I get that. Some of them could be franchised. I get that. T. Higgins, Mike Evans, Michael Pittman, examples from this year. But Keenan Allen, Justin Jefferson, Brandon Ayuk, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, C.D. Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Chris Godwin, Amari Cooper, Brandon Cooks, Deontay Johnson, DeAndre Hopkins, Jerry Jeudy. All of those guys could be available next offseason. So just remember that. You could be walking into next offseason with a lot better foundation, more weapons within your offense, even more money to spend in a better class to select from. All right, back to Watts. Phil Perry tweeted out that he split his workload pretty evenly between run and pass game snaps. Andrew Callahan tweeted out that Watts played 28% of those snaps, 15 tackles, 3 quarterback hits, a half a sack. Started his career with 3 seasons in Minnesota, had a career year in 2021. He had 5 sacks and 46 tackles. He then signed with Chicago in 2022. He actually started 12 games for the Bears in 2022. Evan Lazar says interior pass rush depth. Watts had 17 quarterback pressures on 155 pass rush snaps last year for Pittsburgh. Pro Football Focus Patriots on Twitter posted that Watts had a career-high Pro Football Focus grade in 2023 with an average depth of tackle in the run game of 2.56 yards, which means analytically you could categorize him as a run stuffer. So you bring in Watts. He's part of the rotation. You've got him and Godchow, Aquale, and Roberts. Those guys will rotate. Barmore, I think, is going to play a ton now that he's better against the run. Patriots also signed guard Nick Leverett. This is Cole Strange insurance. We talked about they're not really sure if Strange is going to be available at the very beginning of camp, and he might miss a few weeks. And who knows? He has that injury history. So this is insurance for Cole Strange. Leverett started 10 games for Tampa in 2022. We also know that Antonio Mafi is very raw, so he's not ready. And you want James Andrews to be your center of the future. David Andrews has one more year left on his contract. So this Leverett signing allows Andrews to develop under Andrews. Sounds weird, is what it is. And then eventually take over that spot when Dave calls it a career. Meanwhile, you have the insurance because Mafi's not ready and Cole Strange is banged up. So that signing made a lot of sense. I know it's not sexy, but it made a lot of football sense. All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining me today. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If something big breaks, of course, we'll be all over it. I'll have a breaking news podcast whenever that happens. I appreciate every single one of you. Let's continue to build this momentum. It's been an incredible few days here for the Nick Cattle Show, and it's all because of you. Like, comment, subscribe, rate and review on Spotify. Rate and review on Spotify and Apple Pods. And Patreon, patreon.com. If you want that exclusive content, $5 a month, $1.25. Swap a pint for the Patreon. 1 pint for the month. We'll give you that Patreon page, patreon.com/Nick Cattle, CATTLES, exclusive content. I'll talk to you later on. See you.